Welcome back from Thanksgiving. I hope you are rested and ready to conclude these final 2 weeks of our semester. This is week 14. Welcome to, drumroll please, your brain. Woohoo! What a remarkable organ the brain is. So let's look at how we learn stuff. So the stuff is all of that sensory information that comes at us from the outside, and if it catches our attention, then it's going into our short term, or what's called our working memory. And then after that, it goes into this remarkable process where it is rehearsal. It's called rehearsal, but we're just kind of trying it out. We're comparing it to stuff we know. We might be rejecting it. We're making an opinion on it. And only after time and a lot of multiple exposure to this new information does it then become learned, and it goes into our long-term memory. Here's the thing about short-term or working memory. It's just a little sticky note. There's not a whole lot of room in our working memory. And in fact, in general, it only lasts about 10 to 15 seconds. So this is not where learning happens. Learning happens in that rehearsal and encoding mode, and it's when our brains are recycling that information, we're reviewing it, we slept on the information, we woke up the next day, we reflected on yesterday's class, now it's going into our long-term memory. The two key elements to long-term memory are time and repetition, multiple exposures of the information. We've got 150 trillion neurons and connections in our brains. What a remarkable processor it is. And a guy named Hebb, he discovered that neurons don't like to fire alone when they're creating new memories. They like to find some other neuron that either knows something about this information, maybe it's identical, maybe it's opposite, maybe it's a way to compare. But what he discovered is that neurons that fire together wire together, and when you have multiple neurons firing, you have a stronger learning event and more possibility that it's going into long-term memory. So let's take an average ESL class to see how this might work. These are beginning students learning how to introduce themselves in English. I've got the students lined up in a line dialogue, and they're going to practice this very simple conversation, and they're going to include a handshake. And after about a minute practicing with this student, one line's going to move over, they're going to practice it again with the next student, and so on for about 5 minutes. So that's 5 minutes of this multisensory learning. The vision of the person's faces, the auditory sense of the person speaking, of our own speaking, that physical sense of shaking hands, and before long, they've just about got this conversation down, and it's becoming permanent. We can help students make a donkey bridge. The shaking hands, that's just an example. That's just a way of showing how we can get neurons to fire with other neurons. A donkey bridge, an Eiselsbrücke, is any kind of a mental trick that helps us remember things. Well, as a teacher, the first thing we want to do is try to connect this new information with old information. But there are other kinds of mental tricks, like mnemonics, using pictures, faces, graphic organizers, graphs. I'm going to show you a simple donkey bridge. I want to remember how to say, in German, a stone. Ein Stein. Well, if I can call up a mental image of Albert Einstein holding a single rock in his hand, I've got my donkey bridge to remember Einstein. So really, all learning is memory and recall. But there are two aspects of our memory. There's the storage strength, how well we know something, and our recall strength, how easily we can access those memories. And here's the really, really cool thing. The more we memorize, the more we remember, the more we learn, our brains are automatically creating more storage capacity. It's almost limitless. But here's a caveat. You really need to use it or you will lose it. It is possible to lose access to long-term memories. They may still be in there, but you've lost the access to them if you don't call upon those neurons to fire now and then. So think of somebody who came to the U.S. as a small child, has spent 40, 50, 60 years in an English-speaking environment, and now can no longer remember her first language. That's because those neurons have not been called upon for a very long time. Here's a poser for you. If the human brain was a hard drive or a great big blue thumb drive like this, how many hours of TV could you record on it until it's full? You can pause the video to read the answers to figure out which one you think it is. 10,000 hours, 100,000 hours, a million, 3 million, what do you think? In fact, it's 3 million hours. That's a lot of TV time. So this whole notion that our brains can get full and we can't learn anything more is just a bunch of hooey. So that brings me to the Mythbusters. We're going to bust a few myths about the brain. And here's the first one. Everybody is right or left brain dominant, and we learn best when the teachers appeal to that dominant side of our brains. This is a myth. In fact, both hemispheres of our brains are connected. They're connected through this amazing network of tissue and nerves in the center of the brain, but we use both hemispheres of our brain equally. All right, here's one. Humans use only about 10% of our brains. That is a myth. We now know, thanks to modern imaging technology, that there are no unused portions of our brains. We use the whole thing. Now I'm going to throw myself into this one. I taught you the term learning style. I've been using it for years, and I'm going to stop using it. The whole idea that everybody has a learning style, and we want to appeal to that learning style, is not borne out in brain research. So this myth is busted. What is true is that we have learning preferences. And the basic three are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Keep these three in your brain. Remember them. We're going to come back to them on December 2nd. Instead of talking about learning styles, let's talk about learning modalities. And regardless of what my learning preference is, which is visual kinesthetic, I still should be given information visually. I should be given the chance to read it, and because when we really use all of our senses when we learn. That's the whole point. Okay, the older adults become, the harder it is for them to learn something new, such as a language. Well, you can imagine this is a bunch of hokum. There's no brain research that supports this. In fact, it's the opposite. Brain research shows that there is no decline in the ability to learn as people get older. We might have some hearing loss, we might have some vision issues, there might even be some cognitive issues where we recall slower. But adults are capable of learning new information well into their 80s and even into their 90s. Look at that third bullet point. Look how important context is. You're going to read more about this in your work this week on the Language Learning Advisor. And I love that last quote. What we do with our classroom environment has so much to do with the students' persistence in coming back. All right, intelligence and one's ability to learn is hardwired in our DNA. It's an innate ability that won't change over a lifetime. This is totally busted, and it's busted due to recent psychological research. How we view our successes, or what we think of as smarts, and our failures or our stupidity has to do with our mindset and nothing to do with IQ or intelligence. Think about Luke in the swamp, and he's trying to raise his ship out of the swamp. And he tells Yoda, well, I can move rocks, but moving a ship is totally different. And Yoda says, no different, only different in your mind. You must unlearn what you have learned. So Luke tries it, and he gets distracted by R2-D2, and the ship slips out of his grip, and it falls back into the swamp, and it sinks, and he goes to the shoreline, and he sits down and says, it's impossible. So this week you're going to meet Carol Dweck. You're going to see her TED Talk. She's a psychologist who did research on how people learn and retain information. And what she discovered is it has nothing to do with IQ or what we think of as intelligence. It has everything to do with what she calls either the growth mindset or the fixed mindset. According to Dweck, a fixed mindset assumes that our character, our intelligence, our ability to learn, everything about us is innate. It's in our DNA. We can't change it. I was born dumb. I'll always be dumb. I can't do math. I've never been able to do math. A fixed mindset person gives up easily. They see criticism as an insult. They take it personally. They take a very deterministic view of the world. as opposed to the growth mindset person who sees their failure as a springboard for growth, as a challenge to do better, as a challenge to get it right the next time. And they persist despite their failures, despite all the obstacles. They believe that it's hard work and effort that leads to mastery, not innate ability. They learn from criticism, they see others' successes as inspiring, and they have a very good sense of free will. So once Yoda has lifted Luke's ship out of the swamp and sent it over to dry land, what does Luke do? He says, "I don't believe it." And Yoda responds, "That is why you fail. If you don't believe you can do it, the chances are really good that you won't be able to do it." So you're also going to meet Angela Duckworth, another TED Talk. Angela is a middle school teacher, and she was interested to figure out why is it that some students with lower IQs do better in things like algebra than students with these soaring IQs. And what she discovered was it had nothing to do with their IQ. It had everything to do with their passion and perseverance for very long-term goals, or what she calls grit. And what she discovered about grit, guess what the key ingredient to grit is? The growth mindset. So to promote a growth mindset, praise the effort and the ideas, not the intelligence. Communicate even the smallest of improvements. Don't give up on anybody, and communicate that belief very strongly in everything you do. Use the term "not yet" instead of "you can't do it." Remove bias and prejudice from the classroom and help learners learn to monitor their own progress. You can promote long-term memory by activating schema and helping students make those connections, using graphic organizers and other mnemonic tricks, explicitly teaching study skills and note-taking, teaching metacognitive skills so they know how we learn, be patient, and provide lots of repetition. So which of the following are true? You can pause the video to read the 5 statements, and which ones do you think are true about multitasking? In fact, they are all true. We might feel energized when we multitask, but the truth is, when we multitask, one task is being sacrificed for the sake of the other, and some studies now show that multitasking can actually lower one's IQ. Teach students to study smart. Studying in short 20-minute bursts is better than long-term cramming. Take a break, get some exercise, eat nutritious food, and get abundant sleep. Why? Because that's when we form our long-term memories, when we're sleeping, when we're relaxing, and exercise gets oxygen to the brain so it can fulfill that duty. Praise the effort and the ideas, not the intelligence. Look at the difference in student achievement when it was the effort that was praised. Brain research and adult learning theory tells us that new learning is built upon old learning, that adults need meaning and relevance, that we can lose the access to old knowledge if we don't call upon those neurons to fire now and then. When we know we are improving, we continue to improve. We also know that the human brain is very plastic and it's capable of healing itself even after traumatic injury. Adults can continue to learn well into their senior years, and that learning is not connected to IQ, but it's connected to mindset. Here are 4 brain gurus you're going to meet this week, either in your assignments or in the Want to Know More. Norman Deutsch, Eric Jensen, David Sousa, Benedict Carey. These guys have all written books that I've read, and they're all great. They've written about how the brain works, how it heals, the plasticity of it, and how we learn. So this week, there's an ungraded quiz, so take that first, and then you can, you took the quiz, watch this video again to help you with the answers. You can take it as many times as you want. Watch the videos in D2L. Explore the Language Learning Advisor website, especially the page about language learning and age. Go to the discussion forum and your reflective journal. So here are resources for this week. And with that, I will say thank you very much for listening, and I will see you on December 2nd.